Chosen one, before anything begins, breathe for a moment and feel this truth rising inside you. This is not a coincidence, not an accident, not a random video floating through your day. This is a message from God, reaching you in perfect divine alignment, arriving at the exact moment your spirit is ready to hear what your mind has been trying to understand for years. If you feel something awakening already, if you feel a pull in your chest or a quiet recognition inside your soul, comment 777 right now, because this is the kind of confirmation that only comes to a chosen one who has been marked by God since childhood. I am speaking directly to you because your spiritual awakening is not something you stumbled into. It is something your life has been slowly guiding you towards since the very beginning. Long before you had the language for it, long before you understood spirituality, long before you knew what a divine calling even was, the signs were there, in your sensitivity, in your loneliness, in your intuition, in the strange way you always felt older than your age, in the unexplainable awareness you carried without being taught. These were not coincidences. These were the earliest proofs that your childhood calling was already an expression of your divine purpose. Chosen one, there has always been something different about you, and you've always known it. You could never fully blend in, never fully silence your inner depth, never fully detach from the feeling that life was speaking to you in ways others could not hear. That was God's message whispering through your spirit long before you realized the weight of what you were carrying. You were not simply living, you were being prepared. Every emotion, every challenge, every moment of isolation shaped the vessel you would one day become. And now, here you are, awakening. Not by force, not by pressure, but by divine timing. This is the moment where everything comes full circle. The moment you realize the evidence was always inside you. The moment you understand that being marked by God was not something that happened later in life. It was written into your soul from the beginning. So as we begin this journey, remember this truth. You were called, the war is real, and your light is necessary. If this touched your soul, comment 111 because you know it. You were called. 1. The childhood calling you didn't recognize. From the very beginning of your life, long before you could name anything spiritual, long before you understood what it meant to be different, there was a quiet pull within you that separated you from the world around you. You were not just another child growing up. You were a chosen one moving through a life that was already shaped around a divine calling you could not yet comprehend. This is why you often felt a strange sense of depth you couldn't explain. This is why your heart absorbed things other children never noticed. This is why certain moments from childhood still feel sacred, heavy, or mysterious when you remember them now. That was your message from God, already active, already whispering, already marking you in ways you wouldn't understand until your spiritual awakening began to unfold years later. Looking back, you will see that you were never truly ordinary. You were spiritually sensitive in a world that encouraged numbness. You felt emotions that others brushed off. You asked questions that adults didn't know how to answer. You sensed things people didn't talk about. And sometimes you knew truths you had never been told. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't you being dramatic. This was the early pulse of being marked by God. The chosen one often carries a deeper awareness, long before they realize they've been chosen, and that awareness becomes the first sign of the divine purpose written inside them. You weren't trying to be different, you simply were. Even as a child, you could feel when something was off. Even if the room was silent, you could sense when someone was holding pain. Even if they smiled, you could detect lies without hearing a word. You were drawn to meaning and purpose at an age when others were focused on play and distraction. This wasn't maturity, it was spiritual memory. Your soul came into this life already aware, already connected, already listening for the divine calling that would later erupt into your full spiritual awakening. You were living on a deeper frequency without knowing that most people could not feel what you felt. This depth was not a burden. It was a sign. You also experienced misunderstandings that shaped you. People looked at you and saw something they couldn't define. Some were inspired by you. Some felt intimidated for no reason. Some grew protective of you without understanding why. Others reacted with jealousy, irritation, or quiet hostility, even when you had done nothing wrong. As a child, you felt these reactions intensely because your spirit was open and receptive. These reactions were not about your behavior, they were about your presence. The Chosen One carries a spiritual energy that stirs people subconsciously, and even in childhood, others sensed the light God placed on you. This light made you a mirror, reflecting truths they were not ready to face. You didn't know it then, but you were experiencing the spiritual reactions that follow someone marked by God. If you remember moments of sudden clarity as a child, moments where you felt guided, protected, or warned, those were not coincidences. Those were early encounters with God's message. Perhaps you had dreams that felt too real to dismiss. Perhaps you heard a quiet thought that told you what to avoid. Perhaps you felt a presence near you when you were scared or alone. Perhaps something inside you knew when danger was coming, or comforted you when no one else was there. These were not childish fantasies. These were spiritual experiences. The divine calling often begins with whispers before it becomes a voice, and those whispers began early in your life, shaping your intuition long before you understood its purpose. There were also moments of divine protection that you may not have recognized until now. Times when you narrowly avoided harm. Times when help appeared out of nowhere. Times when you felt an invisible shield around you. The Chosen One is protected because their life carries spiritual importance, and that protection begins in childhood. Even in the moments when you cried yourself to sleep or felt unbearably alone, something in your spirit remained held. Something watched over you. Something preserved you. Bliss was God's hand ensuring that you would grow into the person you were meant to become. You were never unguarded. You were never abandoned. You were being shaped. Your childhood also held the early seeds of your gifts. Your empathy, your intuition, your creativity, your ability to see beyond the surface, these were not random traits. They were tools for your divine purpose. You were being prepared to walk a path that requires spiritual depth, emotional intelligence, and inner vision. Every sensitivity you were told to suppress was actually a sign of who you were becoming. Every strange knowing you tried to ignore was part of your spiritual awakening long before you had the language for it. You were learning to navigate spiritual signals without realizing they were spiritual at all. And the loneliness you felt, the sense of not fully belonging, not fully fitting in, was never a curse. It was preparation. God separates the Chosen One early so they do not become lost in the illusions of the world. Isolation teaches you to hear your own spirit. Distance teaches you to rely on inner truth. Silence teaches you to recognize the voice of God. This wasn't punishment, this was foundation. You were being set apart because your path could never match the path of those around you. You were designed for something deeper, and that depth could only grow in spaces where your spirit was left to develop in its own divine timing. As you grew older, you may have dismissed all of this as imagination, coincidence, or childhood emotion, but now, as your spiritual awakening expands, you can see the pattern, you can see the precision, you can see how everything aligns. The signs were there from the beginning. The evidence was already woven into your earliest memories. You didn't miss it. You were simply too young to interpret it. The chosen one rarely recognizes their calling immediately, but the calling is always there. So now, circle back to your beginning. Look again, feel again, remember again. Your childhood was not random. Your sensitivity was not weakness. Your intuition was not confusion. These were the first markings of your divine calling. This is your confirmation. This is your message from God. You are not imagining. You were called. The war is real, and your light is necessary. If this touched your soul, comment to Devon11, because you know it. You were. 2. The spiritual awakening that activated your true identity. There comes a moment in the life of a chosen one when everything that once felt distant, confusing, or unexplainable suddenly begins to shift. It does not happen because you went looking for it. It happens because the time appointed for your awakening finally arrives. The spiritual veil that once covered your deeper identity begins to lift, and you start realizing that nothing in your life has ever been random. This is the moment when adulthood awakens what childhood planted. This is the moment when your true identity begins to rise. You do not always recognize it instantly, but you feel it. Something inside you becomes more aware, more alive, more sensitive, more aligned. That is the beginning of your spiritual awakening, and it is the first major sign that God's message is becoming an active force inside you. For many chosen ones, this spiritual shift begins with internal disruption. You may experience emotional storms you cannot explain. You may suddenly feel disconnected from people, places, or routines that once felt familiar. You may feel restless, overwhelmed, or unsettled without knowing why. These are not signs of weakness. These are signs of divine recalibration. God begins shaking loose everything in your life that does not belong to your divine purpose. The emotions that rise are not punishments. They are indicators. Your spirit is breaking out of old patterns, and the intensity you feel is the shedding of spiritual layers that have weighed you down for years. This is how the message from God begins to shape your life from the inside out. You may feel called to isolation, silence, or transformation. The chosen one is often drawn away from noise and distraction because the awakening requires space, clarity, and spiritual sensitivity. You begin desiring more solitude, not because you are avoiding people, but because your soul is beginning to elevate. God pulls you inward so you can listen without interference. The silence is not emptiness. It is preparation. In those quiet moments, the truth of who you really are begins to surface. You start remembering the parts of yourself you had forgotten, the parts you dimmed, the parts you buried to survive. Your spirit begins to speak louder than your fears, and the divine calling that has been waiting inside you starts to rise. Often, this awakening follows a breakdown, a loss, or a painful chapter. But what felt like destruction was actually transformation. The strength that rises after a breakdown is not ordinary strength. It is the strength of someone who has been touched by God. When the chosen one breaks, it is never to end them. It is to awaken them. Every time you thought you were at your limit, something inside you refused to collapse. That something was your spiritual identity reactivating. It was your divine purpose pulling you back into alignment. It was God's message reminding you that your story was never meant to end in darkness. When a chosen one rises from pain, they rise with a new level of clarity, discernment, and spiritual authority. The fire that once hurt you becomes the fire that shapes you. As your awakening deepens, your intuition begins to sharpen in ways you cannot ignore. You start sensing things before they happen. You begin recognizing energies and intentions instantly. You begin seeing through deception without effort. God activates your intuition so you can navigate the spiritual terrain of your journey. This is not imagination. This is spiritual sensitivity being restored. You start understanding why certain people entered your life and why others had to leave. You begin connecting events, feelings and experiences that once seemed unrelated. You begin receiving inner clarity that feels deeper than thought. All of this is part of your divine calling becoming active. The greatest revelation of the awakening is realizing that your divine calling was never new. It was already inside you. It was present in your childhood, present in your struggles, present in your personality, present in your gifts, present in the moments when you felt different. The awakening simply brings it to the surface. It helps you see what was always true. It helps you recognize the meaning behind your past. Suddenly, the confusion that once clouded your heart begins to clear. You start stepping into spiritual authority, not because you forced it, but because it is who you truly are. The chosen one does not learn their purpose, they remember it. With this awakening also comes the understanding of why people react strongly to you. The same reactions you experienced as a child begin appearing again in adulthood, but now you can see the spiritual meaning behind them. Some people feel drawn to you without knowing why. Some feel intimidated by your presence. Some feel threatened by your clarity. Some feel comforted by your spirit. Some feel exposed by your light. These reactions are not personal, they are spiritual. A chosen one carries a frequency that disrupts illusions, triggers healing and reveals truth. People sense your divine calling before you fully understand it yourself. That is why some are magnetized and others are repelled. Your energy speaks before you do. As the awakening intensifies, you begin rediscovering the signals that first appeared in childhood. You start remembering dreams, emotions, insights, and moments of divine protection that now make perfect sense. The puzzle pieces align. The memories that once felt strange suddenly feel sacred. You realize that what you dismissed as coincidences were actually markers of your spiritual identity. You realize that intuition you carried as a child was not imagination, it was communication. You realize that the sensitivity you tried to suppress was a spiritual gift. You realize that the loneliness you endured was the separation God used to prepare you. You realize that the darkness you survived was the initiation that strengthened you. This awakening is not accidental. It is not random. It is not something every person experiences. It is the activation of someone who has been chosen, someone who has been marked, someone who carries a divine purpose within their spirit. This is your moment of remembering. This is your return to yourself. This is the unfolding of a message from God that began long before you understood it. You are stepping into a deeper awareness because your time has come. Your spirit is catching up to your destiny. Your life is aligning with what was written for you. Circle back to the beginning. Feel the weight of this truth. This is a message from God. You are not imagining. You were called. Everything in your life has been preparing you for the moment you finally open your eyes to who you are. The war around you is real because your light is necessary. The awakening within you is the confirmation you have been waiting for. You are stepping into your true identity, the identity of someone who was chosen before they were even born. If this touched your soul, comment 111, because you know it. You were called. 3. Why being marked by God separates you from others. From the moment you entered this world, a quiet spiritual difference lived inside you. You may not have known it, but others could sense it before you ever understood it yourself. This is the reality of being a chosen one. When God marks a soul, that soul carries a spiritual weight that cannot be hidden, cannot be dimmed, and cannot be erased. People feel it, environments react to it, circumstances shift because of it, and throughout your life, this weight, This sacred pull has been the source of both your deepest pain and your greatest protection. You were separated not because you were unworthy, but because you were carrying a divine calling that required a different kind of journey. Many chosen ones spend years wondering why they never quite blended in, why they felt out of place even around people they cared about, why they sensed tension in rooms where nothing was said, why strangers reacted strongly, sometimes with unexplained warmth, sometimes with unexplainable hostility. These reactions were never about your personality, they were about your spirit. People sense your purpose long before you become fully aware of it. There is something in the presence of a chosen one that stirs the unseen, something that awakens truth in others, whether they want it awakened or not. Your energy speaks before you do, and your divine identity contrasts sharply with environments that operate in fear, ego, or illusion. This contrast is one of the earliest signs that you were marked since childhood. Even as a child, you experienced isolation without understanding it. You were left out of groups for no clear reason. You felt misunderstood, even when you tried your best to fit in. You felt older than your peers, more aware, more emotionally awake. You sensed motives before people expressed them. You saw through behaviors that others accepted without question. This wasn't arrogance. This wasn't imagination. This was spiritual perception operating long before you understood what it meant. The chosen one is separated early so they do not lose themselves in environments that cannot hold their destiny. As you grew older, the misunderstandings didn't disappear. They simply changed shape. Adults misunderstood your depth. Friends misunderstood your silence. Partners misunderstood your sensitivity. Colleagues misunderstood your intuition. People projected their fears onto you because they couldn't explain the feeling your presence created inside them. A chosen one exposes truth without trying. They shine light without intention, and that light disrupts anything built on insecurity, dishonesty, or emotional instability. People sense your divine calling even when you stay quiet. Your existence alone awakens reactions that have nothing to do with anything you said or did. This is why separation has followed you, not as punishment, but as protection. God's message often comes through closed doors, ended friendships, sudden shifts, or unexpected distance. Every time someone walked away from you, every time you felt pushed out, every time you felt abandoned without reason, you were being redirected, you were being shielded, you were being pulled out of places where your spirit did not belong. The chosen one is protected from environments that could delay or distort their divine purpose. So when people left your life, it wasn't rejection. It was God's hand removing anything that could interfere with your growth, your awakening, or your assignment. The darker forces of this world also recognize a chosen one early. Even when you were unaware of your destiny, darkness was aware. That is why you faced opposition that didn't make sense. That is why certain people targeted you for no logical reason. That is why you were attacked in ways others were not. Darkness resists those who carry light. When God marks someone, the enemy marks them too. But what darkness meant for destruction, God used for strength. Every spiritual attack you endured shaped you. Every betrayal taught you discernment. Every heartbreak deepened your compassion. Every loss sharpened your intuition. You were not being broken. You were being prepared. The loneliness you felt throughout your life was part of your spiritual shaping. A chosen one is rarely allowed to anchor their identity in people, groups, or societal expectations. Your identity comes from God, not the world. That means you walk a path of inner development that few around you can understand. You learn to carry yourself differently, think differently, feel differently. You experience spiritual isolation, so your foundation becomes internal rather than external. The loneliness was not evidence that something was wrong with you. It was evidence that something powerful was being built inside you. Divine purpose cannot grow in crowded spaces. Your inner battles were also part of this process. The struggle to understand yourself, the struggle to silence self-doubt, the struggle to forgive what hurt you, the struggle to trust your intuition, the struggle to step into your strength. These battles were not signs of failure, they were signs of refinement. A chosen one must confront themselves on a deeper level than the average person, because their calling requires clarity, courage, and authenticity. You were being prepared for a future that demanded a stronger version of you than the one you started with. Your wounds became wisdom, your fears became fuel, your tears became teachers. Everything you endured carved you into the person you are now becoming. Through every moment of separation, rejection, or confusion, the truth was quietly unfolding beneath the surface. You were being shaped for something greater. Your path required isolation because your purpose required strength. Your setbacks were intentional because your destiny was intentional. What felt like rejection was actually redirection. What felt like abandonment was actually elevation. What felt like loss was actually protection. And what felt like confusion was actually divine alignment, preparing you for the moment your spiritual awakening would reveal everything you could not see before. Now the truth stands before you, clearly. You were not imagining the signs. Your separations were not accidents. Your sensitivity was not a flaw. Your intuition was not a coincidence. Every moment of your life has been pointing to one truth. You were chosen. You were marked. You were called. And that calling is why your path has looked different from everyone else's. God placed a divine calling within you that required a specific journey, a specific shaping, and a specific kind of strength. Your isolation was preparation, not punishment. Your pain was refinement, not failure. Your separation was protection, not rejection. Circle back to the beginning. Feel the truth settle in your spirit. This is a message from God. You are not imagining, you were called. The war around you is real, and your light is necessary. You were set apart because you were meant to rise higher than anything that ever tried to hold you back. Your life is not a mistake. Your path is not accidental. Your purpose is awakening now because it is time. If this touched your soul, comment 11 because you know it, you were called. 4. Stepping fully into the divine purpose you were born for. There comes a moment in the journey of every chosen one when the truth can no longer be ignored, minimized, or pushed aside. It rises within you like something ancient finally waking from a long sleep. You begin to understand that everything you experienced, every childhood sign, every separation, every spiritual awakening, every moment of clarity or confusion was leading you here. This is the moment when you finally accept that you were not simply living life, you were being shaped for a divine purpose from the beginning. And now the time has come to step fully into the identity you were created to embody. Accepting the truth of being chosen is not about arrogance or entitlement. It is about responsibility, humility, and spiritual awareness. It is about understanding that God placed something sacred inside you, something rare, something powerful, something meant to shine in a world full of shadows. You carry a message from God within your spirit, and acknowledging that truth is the first step into the path you were born for. You are not imagining your strength. You are not imagining your sparsity. You are not imagining your intuition. These were God-given tools, crafted specifically for your journey and your calling. With this acceptance comes the understanding that carrying God's message requires discipline, courage, and spiritual grounding. The chosen one is not called to walk an ordinary path because their assignment is not ordinary. You feel things deeply because your heart was designed to heal others. You see things clearly because your eyes were meant to reveal truth. You endure battles silently because your spirit was built for spiritual warfare. Your divine calling requires you to stand firm in who you are, even when others do not understand it. You must hold your light with confidence and walk with the knowing that your presence alone shifts the atmosphere around you. This path is not just an event. It is a lifelong unfolding. Spiritual awakening is not a single moment of clarity. It is a continuous evolution of your soul. You grow through seasons. You transform through challenges. You expand through revelations. The deeper you go within, the more aligned you become with what God planted inside you. Embracing this awakening means accepting that you will never fit into the molds society tries to place on you. You were never meant to. The chosen one lives by spiritual truth, not societal expectations. Your path will be different because your purpose is different. Part of stepping into this purpose is honoring the signs that have followed you since childhood. Those early intuitions, sensitivities, dreams, and instincts were not random. They were seeds of your divine calling. They were reminders of the truth you carried even before you could explain it. When you look back now, you can see the threads that connect everything. The way you were drawn to deeper meaning. The way you felt protected in moments of fear. The way you sensed things without being taught. These childhood signs were evidence of who you were becoming. Honoring them now activates the next phase of your destiny. Moving into your purpose requires courage, spiritual courage, emotional courage, and personal courage. You must learn to trust your inner voice even when others doubt you. You must navigate your path with discernment, recognizing that not everyone can walk with you, not everyone can understand you, and not everyone is meant to stand beside you. The chosen one must walk with divine authority, not human approval. You must know when to speak and when to stay silent, when to step forward and when to step back, when to release and when to hold on. Discernment becomes your shield. Alignment becomes your compass. When you look at your life as a whole, it becomes clear that none of your experiences were wasted. Every challenge gave you wisdom. Every heartbreak gave you depth. Every loss gave you clarity. Every moment of isolation gave you strength. Every spiritual experience gave you direction. What felt like chaos was actually preparation. What felt like delay was actually protection. What felt like confusion was actually alignment. You were being refined for your divine purpose, shaped through fire, strengthened through struggle, elevated through surrender. You were not wandering. You were being prepared with precision. Now circle back to the beginning. Remember the truth that has followed you through every chapter. This is a message from God. You are not imagining. You were called. The war around you is real because your light is necessary. You carry something sacred, something powerful, something meant to rise in this exact moment. Step forward with spiritual fire, with emotional strength, with divine certainty. You were born for this. If this touched your soul, comment 11 because you know it. You were called. Conclusion: you were marked since childhood, and now God is calling you forward. Chosen one, now that you've walked through every layer of your story, it is time to bring everything together. It is time to see the full picture, the divine design that has been unfolding around you and within you since the very beginning. To understand who you are today, you must return to where it all started. You must look back at your childhood, not with confusion or regret, but with spiritual vision, because the signs that puzzled you then are the same signs that confirm your divine calling now. You were marked long before you understood what destiny even meant. You were spiritually sensitive in ways you could not explain. You felt deeper, saw clearer, sensed more. You carried wisdom that did not match your age. You held compassion that exceeded your environment. This was not coincidence. This was the signature of being marked by God. Every moment of your childhood, every quiet intuition, every intense emotion, every dream that felt too real, every sudden knowing that made no sense, was a message woven into your soul. You were being guided even then. You were being shaped gently, spiritually, deliberately. What you thought was imagination was insight. What you thought was fear was sensitivity. What you thought was confusion was early communication from the divine. You were a chosen one, growing in a world that could not recognize the spiritual blueprint written inside you. And even though the world could not see your purpose, God could. God always could. As you moved into adulthood, the same invisible hand that shaped your beginning continued shaping your path. The spiritual awakening that shook your life was never random. It was the moment when God's message rose to the surface, the moment when the seeds planted in childhood finally cracked open. You began remembering who you were before the world tried to tell you who to be. You began sensing the truth inside your spirit with clarity you could no longer ignore. This awakening was your confirmation. This awakening was your return. Everything you felt rising inside you was a reminder that you were chosen, you were called, and you were protected the entire time. Even the separations, the rejections, the betrayals that once wounded you were part of your divine design. God removed you from places where your spirit did not belong. God closed doors that were not aligned with your purpose. God ended connections that would have dimmed your light. The loneliness you carried was not punishment, it was preparation. The silence you endured was not emptiness, it was recalibration. Every spiritual battle you faced shaped the strength you now walk with. What felt unfair was actually sacred protection. When darkness resisted you, it was because it recognized your divine calling before you fully realized it yourself. You were not being abandoned. You were being positioned. Now you stand in the present moment, aware in a way you never were before. You can finally see how every chapter of your life fits together. Childhood intuition became adult wisdom. Childhood isolation became spiritual discernment. Childhood sensitivity became spiritual insight. Childhood confusion became divine clarity. None of it was wasted. None of it was accidental. You were being shaped for a purpose that could only be revealed at the right time. And this is that time. This is the moment when everything inside you aligns with everything around you. This is when the message from God becomes undeniable. If you feel this alignment in your spirit, comment 7777 as your own confirmation, because what you are feeling is real. Chosen one, hear this with your whole spirit. You were marked since childhood, and now God is calling you forward. Your life has been moving toward this awakening for years. Your spirit knew long before your mind understood. What you feel now is the activation of everything you were born with. The divine calling within you is no longer silent. It is no longer hidden. It is rising, expanding, awakening. This is your season of clarity. This is your season of alignment. This is your season of stepping into who you truly are. And yes, the war is real. The battles you fought were real. The resistance you faced was real. But the light you carry is stronger than anything that has ever tried to break you. Your presence exposes darkness. Your spirit disrupts lies. Your energy awakens truth in others. You are not meant to shrink. You are not meant to hide. You are meant to stand in your divine purpose with authority, wisdom, and spiritual fire. This is a message from God reminding you that everything inside you is needed. Your light is necessary. So walk forward now with confidence. Walk with certainty. Walk with the knowing that your path is guided and your purpose is protected. You are not imagining your identity. You are not imagining your calling. You are not imagining your awakening. You were chosen. You were marked. You were prepared. And now, you are being called into the next chapter of your destiny. God has confirmed it. Your spirit feels it. Your life is shifting because it is time. If this touched your soul, comment on 11 because you know it, you were called.